Well, greetings, my beloved clients and friends. This video is going to be a little bit different. I wanted to just get back to the basics and just talk about some fundamentals, okay? And this comes from this book called The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, written, I think, first time in 1949, and it was updated every 5 years or so. Last one was 1970, and it was a book that really influenced Warren Buffett. He went so far as to call it the greatest book on investing ever written. He got to know the author very good, who was a professor at Columbia, so he went and got his master's degree at Columbia to get to know this guy, Benjamin Graham, that wrote this book. And then after he graduated, he went back home to Omaha, but he wanted to go work for this guy. He wanted to really get to know this guy. That's just how impressed he was by his approach to investing. And so this book, The Intelligent Investor, I taught a class on investing at the local college for over 10 years, and this book was my textbook. And the book provides an emotional and analytical framework for investing. And so I want to talk about that emotional framework. And so this is what Benjamin Graham says. He says, investing requires a certain disposition or a certain personality or a certain emotional framework. And he says, here's the 5 characteristics of an intelligent investor: patience, disciplined, eager to learn, harness your emotions, and think for yourself. Those are the 5 characteristics that an intelligent investor should possess. And we're going to talk about each of those and why they're all so important. The first one is patience. Investing, at least the type of investing that I do for my clients, is a long game, right? We're investing for your retirement, and then, when you retire, the game is not over. That's when it really steps into that second half of the game, which is to provide you an income for the rest of your life. So really, the investing game that we play is a lifelong pursuit. So, it requires some patience. It's a lifelong pursuit. It's not something that's gonna, bear fruit overnight. It's not a one-day type of transaction. So we want to be patient about it because it's a long game that we're playing. Second one is discipline. There are certain fundamentals and in investing, and it's tempting or sometimes to get away from those fundamentals, from what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. And that requires discipline. And especially at the tops and bottoms of markets is when discipline is in very short supply, and patience is in very short supply as well. And it's when it's hardest to be the discipline is when you have to be the most disciplined, right? When at the tops of the markets, everybody's getting away from the fundamentals and doing well, and here's the guy sticking to the fundamentals, and at the tops of the markets, they tend to fall behind a little bit because the most speculative investments at the tops of markets are the ones that do the best. And at the bottom of markets, when everybody's, panicking and selling, you got to stay disciplined and say, no, the fundamentals are saying something else. And so it requires a lot of discipline to stick to your investing fundamentals. Patient, disciplined, eager to learn. The thing about the stock market, it's a good teacher. Right away, it'll correct you when you did the wrong thing, and over time, it will reward you when you do the right thing. And it's a good school, and it's a good learning experience. And you're like, wow, now I know. When you make a mistake, you're like, oh, now I know. And so, but the intelligent investor will learn from that. Will take those lessons and add them to his his bag of fundamentals and say, okay, now I know. The unintelligent investor will repeat the same mistake over and over again. I always panic at the bottom. I always get giddy at the top. Be eager to learn. You did that last time, but this time maybe learn from that and do it different. I got away from my fundamental. Okay, learn from that. Be eager to learn from your wins and your losses. Analyze them and say, what can I learn from this? Why did that work, or why didn't it work? And let me add that to my bag of tricks. So be eager to learn, patient, disciplined, eager to learn. Harness your emotions. Harness your emotions. Investing is not something to be done here. It's supposed to be done up here at your heart, not with your heart, with your head. Harness your emotions. The biggest mistakes people make is often they get too emotional. They get too excited when they're winning, and they panic. Fear and greed are the big emotions that drive bad investing decisions. And the market wants to stimulate and promote emotional investing. It's like Las Vegas, the lights and the bells, and they want you to be emotional, because when you're emotional, you make bad choices, right? So you got to harness those emotions. And the last one is patience, discipline, eager to learn, harness your emotions. And number 5, think for yourself. There's a lot of voices to hear. That people always giving opinions and have ideas, and you can't just blindly follow everything you hear. Think for yourself. I have analysts on staff, and sometimes they tell me, well, this is what I say, what do you think about this? And then they look something up and say, well, this analyst is saying this. That's not what I want to hear. I want to hear what you think about it, right? Not what somebody else is thinking about it. Okay, so think for yourself, have your own opinion. You start following what other people say, and sometimes that leads you down the wrong road. So have your own opinion, think for yourself. And famous last words are gonna always be some variation, almost always be some variation of one of these 5. I should have waited, right? That's patience. Discipline. I knew better, right? That's discipline. Patient, eager to learn. I should have known, right? Eager to learn. Harness your emotions. I panicked. I freaked out. I got too excited. I was feeling too good, or I was feeling too bad, right? And think for yourself. I shouldn't have listened to that person, right? These are all famous last words, and they're all some variation of not doing one of these 5 things, right? Your mom's scolding you, and you're hearing it. Like, if everyone else jumped off the bridge, would you do it? Because everyone else was doing it. That's your excuse. Well, think for yourself. Harness your emotions. Be disciplined. And so these are the 5 characteristics of an intelligent investor. And either you got it or you don't, man. And if you don't, you better just, try to develop it, or put that hat on when you're investing, if you're not that way naturally. You gotta be patient. You gotta be disciplined. Be eager to learn. Harness your emotions and think for yourself. Now, here's the good news. On Wall Street, when you're investing, there's always a counterparty. If you're buying something, you're buying it from someone who's selling it. And when you're selling something, you're selling it from someone who's buying it. You're selling it to someone that's buying it. So it seems like, who's right? You think buying is a good decision. Well, apparently that person thinks selling is a good decision. Or you think selling is a good decision. Apparently that person thinks buying is a good decision. So, you're always probably at odds with the counterparty. Now, maybe they have different reasons. They're not selling because they think it's bad. Maybe they're selling because they need the money, So, that's not always the case, but in general, when you buy, you're buying from someone who's ready to sell, and when you're selling, you're selling to someone that's ready to buy. And so maybe one of you is making a good decision, one of you is not. That could be the case. Now, here's the thing: you have a counterparty, and if you analyze the counterparty and you ask yourself, is the counterparty patient, disciplined, eager to learn, harnesses emotion and thinks for themselves? In general, pertaining to Wall Street, the answer is no across the board. And that's a good thing, because you could take advantage of that. If you're the patient one in the transaction and they're the impatient one, you're probably going to win, right? And they are the impatient one. Wall Street is very impatient. They only want to know what happened last quarter, and they want to react to everything in the news, and they don't play the long game. So that's good. That's what I like about investing. If you're able to have these 5 characteristics, this is a good game to play. And it's not a game, but it's a good counterparty to have. Wall Street in general is not disciplined. They do let their emotions get the best of them. They don't stick to fundamentals. If you look in 2008, what happened in the global financial crisis, which really started in the real estate market? And these lenders who have rules, they have guidelines, they have things like debt to income and loan to value and credit scores, and they have, the 4 C's of credit, and they just got away from it. They just got away from those disciplines, and they started just lending money to anybody that could fog a mirror. And, someone would come in to get a loan, and they felt like they had to do it, because if they didn't give that person the loan, the lender down on the other corner would. And it's like, well, apparently that person doesn't see any problem with it, right? Think for yourself. Stick to your discipline, be patient. And sometimes that means sitting it out, right? So at the tops of the markets, here's a trait of a market top, is that the worst investors are doing the best, because the most speculative, the things with the least fundamentals at tops of markets tend to run up. And so you see the investors with fundamentals sitting on the sidelines saying, well, hey, things don't look good. But the foolish investors are just running up. Baron D. Rothschild, one thing I learned from him, he said, leave the last 10% to someone else. Leave the last 10% to someone else. So he didn't want to take that last 10% at the top of the market. It's the most risky. It's the most risky piece. First it's the easy wins, then it starts getting harder and harder. That last 10% is really hard and really risky. He said, no, I don't even want to play that. Just leave that to someone else. Like, that takes discipline, because that's when the party's getting the most exciting. It's the fullest. There's no parking at that party, and that's when things are about to come crashing down. So that takes discipline, and it takes harnessing your emotions, and it takes thinking for yourself. And so back to your counterparty, they're not patient, they're not disciplined, they're not eager to learn. They repeat the same mistakes over and over. They create bubbles, and then these bubbles burst, and they ride them up and they ride them down, because they're not eager to learn. The signs were there, and they should have known. Harness your emotions. Wall Street is the most emotional place. They get giddy, they get manic, and then they get depressive, So, and they don't think for themselves. They run like lemmings. Well, there's this herd mentality on Wall Street. So guess what? That's all good news. Because if you could stand out from the crowd and be the lone patient voice, the lone disciplined one, the one that's eager to learn, the one that harnesses emotions, the one that thinks for himself, you can make money trading with that person that's not any of those things. Imagine a guy that owned a pawn shop, right? And he's sitting there at his desk, and someone comes in wanting to sell this watch and get some cash, right? Who's the patient one, right? The guy trying to sell the watch is not patient. He's undisciplined. He's super emotional, right? And if the pawn shop owner just has a steady head, he looks at the watch and he knows what he's looking at. In his mind, he's able to calculate, oh, that thing's worth $200. He says, no, I'll give you 100. And the guy gets, oh, no, man, I need more money than that. Come on, man, give me 150. And if the guy, pawn shop owner, doesn't get carried away, he stays disciplined, right? He doesn't need it. He has to remember he doesn't need to buy it. That guy needs to sell it. He doesn't need to buy it, right? And he just stays disciplined. And the guy said, but the other guy down the other corner will give me 120. Well, then go take it from that guy, right? Think for yourself. You don't have to think, oh, well, that other guy thinks it's worth 120. Maybe I should give him 120, or maybe be more, right? But if he can stay patient and disciplined and eager to learn, harness emotion, think for himself, he'll get good deals. Especially because of the position he sits himself in. The people that walk in to trade with him are generally desperate and generally not good investors, So he has a winning game, okay? And if you're patient and disciplined and eager to learn, harness your emotions and think for yourself, it could be a winning game too. You're not going to win every time, and at the tops, sometimes the guys without the discipline are doing the best. And in 1999, which was at the peak of irrational exuberance when the market was just going up like crazy, and there was a magazine, I don't remember which one, I think it was Time magazine, and the cover was a picture of Warren Buffett, and it said, has Warren Buffett lost his touch? Because he was not really participating in this huge run-up. He didn't own those super high flyer stocks that were just ripping and doubling and tripling overnight. And so his performance was, compared to what these other high flyer was lackluster. Actually, he was down a little bit in a market that everybody was making money, even people on E-Trade with no experience, because the market was pulling money out of good stocks and chasing .com stocks, And so Warren Buffett was actually down in 99, and then came the .com bubble burst in 2000, and guess what happened? Warren Buffett was up in 2000, the market was down. 2001, Warren Buffett was up, the market was down. 2002, actually everyone was down in 2000, even Warren Buffett. But he was down less than the rest of the market, and he recovered better. But he just stayed patient. He stayed disciplined. He didn't get away from his fundamentals, and as a result, he kind of rode out that final push up. But he also avoided that big downward pullback to the most part. So, because he stayed patient, he stayed disciplined, he remained eager to learn, he harnessed his emotions, and he thought for himself. Okay, and so this video is more than anything probably a reminder to me. We were in the office this week looking at the market, and we look at the valuation. It seems a little bit high. There's a lot of things to be positive about or enthusiastic about, but when you look at valuations, they look a little bit high, and we were talking about it, and what do you think about the valuations of the market? And the conversation kept leaning towards justifying why this time is different, right? And we caught ourselves like, we're doing it, aren't we? we're justifying why this time is different, and we talk about it some more, and then we start drifting into trying to explain why, and we kind of had to chuckle because our tendency was try to explain why, and maybe some of those reasons are right, but it's like a sign. It's like, be careful, Jonathan. Be patient. Be disciplined. Harness your emotions. Think for yourself. Be eager to learn, right? And so I guess this is a reminder to me more than anything, and just to let you know that we do our best to stay disciplined and patient. And sometimes that means passing up on these high flyers that people are making money on. And like, hey, Jonathan, why aren't you more heavily invested in some of these high flyers, these stuff my kids are talking about? And we might have to leave those gains to someone else because they're very risky. They're very speculative. There's, a lot of huge assumptions that aren't necessarily givens need to occur for that to make sense. And, we're not comfortable with that. So, sometimes we pass on those that takes patience, takes discipline, and thinking for yourself. Everyone else is doing it. If everyone else is doing it, that works for a while until it doesn't. And so I just wanted to share those thoughts with you about the characteristics of an intelligent investor. Once again, patience, discipline, eager to learn, harness your emotions, and think for yourself. And we'll do our best to stick with that, because over time that's what's going to get us the kind of results we want, and that's what our clients, we believe, want us to do. So hope you guys have a good weekend. Hope you enjoyed the 4th, and any questions you have, feel free to reach out. Any comments, we be happy to hear from you. Have a great day.